Did anyone get that?
Yeah.
Carol!
You better move. You're gonna go next.
They're chained!
Get out now! Get out! On the ground! All of you on the ground now! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Don't move!
We're environmental protesters! Please!
I know everybody's seen that video. Knock it off, Rob. I'm gonna kill you.
Wow, it's so cool that Scott Hahn was driving that cop car. Am I right? This is like the things that happen.
I know everybody's seen that video, but that video, dude, it's the first time I've seen these climate activists get it, and I was so excited about it. It's like,
the lady in the background who's like, I don't know, she almost seems like she's narrating in it, almost like in a sarcastic way. She's like, "We're non-violent. We're environmental protesters."
you see these all the time, right? Like people like drag them out of the way and stuff. It's crazy. But all right, let's do some house cleaning. Everybody, please, you know the drill. Hit like, subscribe. We do have a few new Apple reviews we're going to read.
Yep.
So let's bring those Apple reviews up. For anybody that doesn't know, we have everybody go on Apple iTunes podcast reviews. You leave us a review. You can say anything you want about us as long as you leave us 5 stars. The goal for you is to make us laugh. Say something funny, trash us, whatever you want, but try to say something to get us to laugh. You got them, Rob?
I do. Give me just a second.
You read them.
Okay, first one. Purgatory for Your Ears from Dominic G. King. Your ears will be bleeding at the end of the show. If only Anthony didn't talk so much, or not at all. I'm not even sure they have any Irish heritage, so I'm not sure how they can claim to be Catholic. But hey, the beginning and ending music is terrific, so I gave it 5 stars.
That's actually good. The beginning and ending music.
Okay, from Tom Getz, 5 stars here. Anthony's voice sticks in your head long after the episode. I want Anthony to be the voice in my head. Oh, that's dangerous. To be the voice in my head and narrate my inner monologue when I talk to my wife. Or do anything where I have to watch what I say. Do you think we could get Anthony as a Siri voice option? Maybe Siri would actually understand you then, Anthony. For anyone who's ever been on the other end of a text message from Anthony, it's the worst thing in the world because Siri does not understand what he's saying and it screws it up so bad.
Ever. She really does not understand me. That's terrible artificial intelligence.
We could call it the Long Island Extra Special.
And then I think there's one more, right?
From PDub5446, surprisingly good. I normally hit the 30-second button 6 times to zoom past Rob's intro, or listen at least juice it up to 2 times to get through it without needing to go to confession. I accidentally slowed the intro to half speed and pretty sure I got a contact buzz from the noises emanating from my speakers. Everyone should listen to it that way once and be prepared to laugh. The guy with the boat that sounds like Harvey Fierstein and wants to be Firestein and wants to be everyone's best friend is okay too.
It wants to be everybody's best friend.
That's so true. You just want to be everyone's best friend, man. Mike Lewis, Trent Horn.
I I love that people are picking up on like the little nuances of the show like that. Speaking of Anthony's voice, so Sunday I go to mass, and after mass, there's a guy Mike that I've known for years, but I don't like tell people I have a podcast. But his wife, he just recently got married, and his wife sends him a video of Father Isaac, and he's telling his wife, he's like, I know Anthony. Anthony goes to church, and she's like, yeah, right. She didn't believe him. He sees us after mass, and he's talking to my wife and me, and he's telling us the story, and I'm talking, and his wife comes over, and she goes, you're the voice.
You're the voice.
So
Poor
it's pretty funny.
woman.
You know what it is? It's like you're the mouth from the Goonies.
I always love when I make a typo, and you correct me. That's what I said, booby twat.
So I am throwing so this show is on locals right now too. Trivia, which is going to be starting around 8 p.m. Central in about an hour, will be only on locals. But if you're watching this on locals right now, I'm not going to be able to look at the locals comments.
So wait, we'll only have 1 hour on locals then.
Yes.
Okay, so we should boogie here then. So
Well,
all right,
we'll have whatever we don't use out of 2 hours here.
right. Okay, so we'll try to keep this under an hour because let's just get to the point. Adrian's wife calls me the voice too. All right, so this week was a little hectic because we had a little bit of firestorms of Michael Lofton going after Ralph Martin, and Mike Lewis going after Scott Hahn. Now, I wanted to just preface this by saying when the trads went after Scott Hahn, they lost me. Like, I have such a deep affection for Scott Hahn. I see him as like almost an older brother in the faith. I learned so much from that guy. And when the trads went after him, it like turned me off so much that I almost didn't want to be associated with the trad label. So I understand people who are more normie catching a little bit of when they see Scott Hahn catching a little bit of heat from the other side, them being just as turned off as I was from the trad side. The idea that Scott Hahn is aligning himself with a sede vacantis bishop is just so preposterous, right? I mean, you guys have any initial thoughts on this before I get into my diatribe?
Only thing I thought was just it's interesting to me that there seems to be online a more vigorous set of Catholics who essentially want their future jobs to be like the Inquisition, but for like leftist authoritarian agendas. Because that's essentially all that's kind of going on, is that it's like anybody who has even the slightest critique is at this point going to be automatically all the way, it's a far right person, except a follower of Mustache Man, essentially, in the political terms, but just apply this to the churches. That just seems to be where the tendency is going.
The funny thing is, Don always points this out. Whenever people on Twitter are like, we need to bring back the Inquisition, Don always says, who do you think the Inquisition will be going for? It's not going to be going for the heretics. It's going to be coming for us. I mean, we saw the Inquisition visit Bishop Strickland because he dared step out of line. It's like, but this whole thing kind of gets to the point that I was making with Trent Horn when Trent was on, where it's like, Scott Hahn made the slightest comment. All he said was, I appreciate Bishop Strickland. Right? What did he actually say, Rob? Do we have the actual comment? I think he just said something like along the lines of, I appreciate Bishop Strickland for this beautiful message. Something so harmless.
It's like a sentence, like one sentence.
It was a sentence. So I'm grateful for the inspiring words of our. No, that's actually a different tweet. So that's from today. Let's not bring that one up yet. We're going to get into that one. So he had originally said, I'm inspired by the words of Bishop Strickland or something along those lines. Now, in this letter Bishop Strickland wrote, we read it on air last week with Nick. He does not say anything about Pope Francis in it. He just reiterates the Catholic teaching. But when I had Trent on, Trent was making an issue of someone like Taylor Marshall talking about the moon landing and saying that, he has a big voice and a big platform and he needs to be careful about what he says. But I kind of tried to flip it on him a little and said, the guys at Catholic Answers, the guys at Franciscan, the guys at Steubenville, when those guys say something, they kind of set the tone for moderate Catholicism.
They
Right.
let you know kind of what
His
is
ex-
acceptable, what's the mainstream.
yeah,
Right.
His exact I have it pulled up here. His exact statement was, quote, "I am grateful for Bishop Strickland's inspiring words," end quote.
Now that inspired a hit piece. Now, I we'll get into Mike Lewis in a second, but yeah, it's like now Scott Hahn saying that for the Francis fans, it is like scary because this is not a trad, right? This is not someone that they can justify Traditionis Custodes with. So, like, you know, they said Taylor Marshall was rallying trads to the traditional Latin Mass, and we were using that as a rallying point instead of using the Pope as the point of unity. We were using the traditional Latin Mass as the point of unity. So when someone like Scott Hahn just says the lightest statement, it freaks them out because it's not a trad, right? So, but the point is that this sentiment was never really about trads. It was never about the liturgy. It really was always about faithful Catholics having a very difficult time with this pontificate. Leftists are always predictable. So this is just one of those things where it's just everybody's having a hard time. Now, Scott Hahn's never, ever said a word about Pope Francis negative. Any chance he has gotten to be able to say something positive, he has. Now, that is a position that I think is admirable, right? As a Catholic, like you want to not disrespect the Holy Father. It's a tight line we all walk. We don't want to become overly critical of the Holy Father and things like that. It's a very tough spot for us as Catholics that we're in under this pontificate because we're all so uneasy about it. But when a guy like Scott Hahn says something, it reverberates through the entire Catholic community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's if they're going crazy at Dr. Hahn over this, I think something might come out in about a month that they could potentially go even crazier about something that Dr. Hahn is endorsing, that they're really not going to like.
Yeah.
Because so there's a book coming out at the end of September that endorses creationism, that says that it's the suppression of the Latin Mass is more or less illegal. I mean, that hits so many of the trad talking points, but is really just the Orthodox faith, right? And of course, Dr. Hahn has, among others, has endorsed this, and I think, like I said, I think they're going to grab onto that even more so than what they've done so far.
Yeah, they probably will, just because it's like when you think about it, this just goes to show you kind of how weak their narrative has gotten and how gun shy they are. Because we're a decade plus right into the current pontificate, and most
don't
people
remind me.
Yeah, most people who are criticizing the Holy Father, notice how they're criticizing him not from a place where like a true die-in-the-wool leftist would be typically or historically criticizing the papacy. Like the papacy would generally be criticized from leftists in the context of, like, for instance, feminists saying like, oh, this just upholds the patriarchy. It's just putting people down. So it's like a deep-seated hatred against the papacy in and of itself. Traditionalists love the papacy. They absolutely love the office of the papacy. They love what's going, or what our Lord did with it and instituting it in his wisdom, but they don't like what's going on. So whenever you see, for lack of a better word, just mainstream Catholics starting to come out and really have some uneasiness. And this is not the first time. This is the first time really Scott Hahn has done anything, but it's not even that big. Again, it's just it's one sentence essentially on social media.
A sentence praising a letter that reiterated Catholic teaching. He did not say anything about Pope Francis in this letter. It was just a letter praising, but the guilt by association that goes on with that. I'm sorry, Nick. I didn't mean to cut you off. God.
Oh no, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, you see that because people in that narrative framework more toward the left are just so gun shy now of any criticism that it's, you know, they eat themselves. This is how every revolution works, is that the revolution eventually eats itself. When you look at especially the French Revolution, 1789, what do you see eventually happen? Everyone's gung-ho. Yeah, let's get this revolution going. Let's get rid of the old, bring in the new. But then eventually it goes so far that they end up guillotining many of their own leaders.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they
that's
always
just how every revolution works, whether it's 1789, 1918 with the Soviets, 1965 in the church, fill in the blank.
So they okay, they'll have you believe, okay, so even Francis's recent comments about the American church, right? They'll have you believe it's a very small contingency that is resisting Francis, and they'll even say that they'll mock the traditional Latin mass movement and say it's less than 2% of the entire church, blah 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 blah. But when you really understand how small the movement that supports Francis is, Rob, pull up and I don't want anyone to think so I have a very cordial relationship with Mike Lewis, and this is not a knock at Mike Lewis that I'm about to do, but I want to just show you 9 hours after he put up a video discussing the exact same topic we're discussing. 109 views 9 hours later. We have 113 live viewers, okay? You have to understand there is no market for this content. There is no market. Like, people are not, we are such a small channel, right? And when you think about a guy like even Michael Lofton was 55,000 subscribers, when he's just talking like generic positive things about Pope Francis, nobody tunes in. When he talks about Taylor Marshall, when he talks about Ralph Martin, I mean, you go after, I mean, come on. It was so ridiculous. I actually sat through that video, and it's like Ralph Martin just went on air and spoke from the heart about his uneasiness about things that are going on. And like, I mean, when you start to get a guy like Ralph Martin and you start to get a guy like Scott Hahn that are finally starting to speak up a tiny bit, I think it's just their way of trying to say, hey, maybe we can slow this synodal process down a little bit. Nobody said anything about the Pope. It was just you okay. With Ralph Martin, I guess he did. He kind of said, look, it's kind of obvious what Francis is doing. He's, personnel is policy. And yeah, it's like for Lofton to go on and pretend like we're just framing what Francis is doing as out of context. Like, no, he's promoting men that are notorious supporters of horrific things. Like, these are men who are publicly in support of overturning church teaching. What perception are we supposed to have of him unless we pretend that's not what he's doing, and we have to twist things around to make them fit in this box when that is clearly not what's happening? He's clearly trying to do something revolutionary in the church.
Yeah, at least get it going in some form or fashion. That's why I think that what's going to end up happening is that, I'll sometimes tune into these various shows that do these like criticisms of traditionalism, or they'll try to explain away what's going on. And what I find is that in general, they'll sit there, they'll take an hour with one sentence that the Holy Father makes, and they'll read in a ton of maybe their personal theological training. They'll read a ton of that into what's going on. But the problem is that they're, in a certain sense, falling into, eisegesis, right? Being kind of just like, looking at one phrase, taking a ton of background stuff, throwing it in there, instead of eisegesis or exegesis, which is like, okay, let us read the whole of what's going on and let us observe what's going on. And that's why I think you brought it up perfectly, Anthony, when you were talking to Trent Horn, is that it's like, okay, you can say things that in the abstract scholastic boardroom, sure, you can get to stick. But that's just not what's going on the boots on the ground. And
you have to pretend.
Yeah,
you have to pretend. You have to actually ignore so much to sit there and say, like, even with, okay, so I'll give you a specific example. Ralph Martin said that I think it was which bishop was it? The Brazilian bishops who Anthony, if you host dialogue between Martin and Lofton, I'll super chat $100. Do it. Love you guys. I would talk to either one of them. Like, I honestly, guys, if you don't realize what we're doing on this channel, like, I'm trying to have conversations with people that don't normally sit and talk. Like, I don't want I don't want anybody breaking off into these little tribes. I think that's horrible. Like, that's the worst thing that's going on in the Catholic Church right now, is people breaking off into tribes. I would sit down and have a conversation with anybody. But
I think
also,
the
I also want
tribes
to have goodwill if I'm going to sit with them.
like I think the breaking off into tribes, I mean, really, that's, you know, the breaking off of the different theological schools, that's always been a thing, as long as we're willing to talk to one another.
Yeah.
As long as we're willing to extend goodwill to one another, that's what we need to be doing.
It's the quasi heresy hunting, which is just getting ridiculous, because it's like this. I can absolutely 110% take the criticisms of someone if the criticism comes from a place of goodwill, and if the criticism is not based off of, like, again, and I'm not trying to impugn anything, but like, if the criticism is coming mainly from the place of, I know that this criticism will boost up the algorithmic search engine and get me more money, you know, that is something that's concerning. I think that, like, I remember Tim Flanders one time saying something to the effect of, like, let us outdo one another in humility. And I think that that's a good thing. So I think we can like criticize each other well, but then it's like, at the end of the day, if we can all just shake hands and admit that we're brothers and we all do desire to be on the same team, that's a good thing. But what's going on right now, in a lot of ways, reminds me of whenever I was an evangelical, and you go onto like the evangelical side of YouTube, and there are plenty of heresy hunting shows out there who list pretty much everybody under the sun except for them as a heretic. And this is just what it reminds me of, is it's like there's these purists who are looking around and saying, oh, Scott Hahn, he's fomenting probably some schism now, because look, he has one sentence on Facebook. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
So even Mike Lewis, I mean, he had to look. You don't write an article going after Scott Hahn, who is probably the most beloved figure in lay Catholicism. I mean,
more people have listened to his original conversion story talk than will ever run across Where Peter Is over the next 100 years.
That have ever listened to Taylor Marshall. I mean, come on, you're talking.
Well, yeah, it works both ways.
Like,
you're right.
Forget Where Peter Is. Like, he is more conversion, more Protestant conversions, more reversions can be attributed to the work that Scott Hahn has done than to any other figure in the American church ever. I mean, you know, you could talk like lay people. I'm not talking about, you know, like, you know, we're not talking about Lefebvre and everyone. Like, I'm talking lay people, right? So you can't think you're going to write an article like that. You know, your intention is to light a fire. You know, like, it is a troll article. It is not, it's not like, it's almost like, if you're going to light the fire, own it. Like, double down even. Don't back off and go, why is everybody so upset? Like, are you crazy, Mike? Come on, dude. You went after the most beloved layperson in the entire church, who's loved by both sides. The guy's he's not a controversial guy.
Our listener Adrian said, like, you went after the Mr. Rogers of Catholicism.
Come on. You went after him, and then you're like, I don't understand why I'm getting so much backlash. It's like, dude, are you kidding me? Come on. Now, I will, in Mike's defense, like, Mike would say, like, Hahn has promoted books that may be critical of the synodal way, things like that. But he's never said anything about the Pope. But
like, is that not in his right to do so? Like, that's the
course, that's the point of synodality, isn't it?
Yeah, this is what I'm getting. This is what's so funny to me, is it's just like, oh yes, let's listen, let's accompany, but you must adhere to every single little jot and tittle, or else, boom, you're done.
We're all about encounter, except certain kinds.
Yeah, no, right. Like, it's so crazy. It's like, we want a listening church where, and Cardinal Supers just put out a tweet today or yesterday. He's like, the synodal process is about listening to the whole people of God. Now, in his mind, the people of God are exactly what it said in my kids' catechism lesson, where my kids' religion class, what I taught from home in the diocesan religion book, tried to say, who are the people of God? Muslims, Jews, and Christians. what is the church? The people of God. And they tried to, it wasn't like directly saying they're in the church, but they were doing it
You
by
showed me it
implication.
was certainly implied.
It was implied by implication,
Oh,
right?
and that's not even something that's in a small catechism, because I can pull it up for you guys if you're really interested, but you'll even see in Ratzinger's commentary on the Second Vatican Council, when they define that term, they use specifically that term, the people of God, because they felt like the mystical body of Christ, that phrase that's really coined,
It's very exclusionary.
it's too limiting. And the problem is it's like, I can pick up any theology manual from the 1950s and it'll be very clear. No, that's not what the church means.
So when I told everybody that my kids had that in their religion book, like normie Catholics, normie Pope Francis supporting Catholics, like castigated me, and they were like,
They're like,
"That's
no,
not
you didn't."
No, you didn't. I'm like, I have pictures of it. I'm gonna find them because people think I'm lying about it. I'm like, this isn't me like picking on something. Like my kids went to a regular diocesan religion class that the parish let me teach them from home, and this was something I saw in the book. I posted pictures in the group chat with Rob, Jason, and Mark. I was losing my mind when I saw it. I went crazy. But it's like, everybody wants to be heard. The people of God need to be heard. Unless you believe the Catholic faith.
Hold on. I think I hear one of the people of God who wants to be heard right now.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I come to talk with you again.
Freaking Steve, he's out of his mind. I think I got a new one too. We didn't load it into the computer, but he sent me a new one serenading us. But yeah, it's just nuts. It's like, okay, so this is a listening church. This is the listening sessions. We want to hear what you people have to say. Okay, we're very uncomfortable with some of the things being discussed. And they said, shut up, don't say a word. We're coming after you and we're writing a hit piece on you.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, this is just, again, how every revolution works. And someone in the comments, they said it was, I think it was like, what was it, Mr. Proximus? What was it? Something like they hate manuals. Yeah, Proximus. Yeah, no, 100%. Like you see a lot of these people. Can you really say that doctrinal integrity is at the top of the list of priorities right now?
Not at all.
They don't believe in doctrinal integrity, except for the new doctrine.
Well, okay, so go back to the Ralph Martin thing, right? Ralph Martin said, which bishops wrote their understanding of Amoris? Do you remember?
Oh, are you talking about so it was the Argentinian bishops,
Right.
and they're the ones who came out with what everyone was assuming it was saying. Divorced and remarried,
so you had all these Catholic apologists trying to wiggle around and go, well, that's not really what he's saying. It's not really what he's saying. The Argentinian bishops come out and they're like, no, this is what he's saying. Pope Francis goes, this is exactly what I'm saying. And the Catholic apologists went, well, wait, slow down. That's not what he's saying. So Ralph Martin is like, look, he says right in there, if you are at peace in your heart and know that your first marriage was not valid, you can go and receive. And it's like, well, no, if like the annulment process hasn't happened, then you can't know in your heart that this happened. So Michael often goes and he's like, that's not what it says. If you read it carefully, and he goes, if you know in your heart, you cannot be denied reconciliation and the Eucharist. And it's like, because you're living in sin. Like, that's problematic. Like, if you're living in a sinful situation, you can't, and you don't have a firm purpose of amendment to remain chaste, how can you receive absolution? It's just as problematic as if they said, go ahead and receive communion. It's almost more problematic. Like, you're receiving absolution without a firm purpose of amendment.
And that's no good. Because I mean, how can you have contrition if you're not willing to have a firm purpose of amendment?
I mean, that's a sacrilege, just like receiving unworthily.
No, it is, and it would be an invalid confession, because it's like, if you're not contrite, like contrition should flow from contrition. A lot of people think contrition is like someone crying their eyes out. If tears come, that's fine, but contrition it's a choice in the will. It's a virtue in the will. And so what it is it's you recognize with your intellect, I have done wrong, and then your will is turned away from your sin, and you're repulsed by it, right? You're disgusted by it, and then you turn toward Christ as the Savior and Helper of men, and then you receive forgiveness. But it's like, if you're going to turn toward Christ, then how can you also at the same time, like our Lord talks about, like if there's a guy who's in the plot, like he's plowing away, how can he turn back around and go the opposite direction? He can't. You can only serve one master.
The irony of that whole thing, though, is like, I've never seen anybody denied communion for like, it's like the people who like, there was nobody clamoring for that footnote in Amoris, and it's like, and even the other footnote where it says, eternal punishment is contrary to the gospel. I don't think that's the proper wording. Like I've heard Michael Lofton say, no, he's talking about in the church, which I actually appreciated that he did that, because it's like, all right, I don't want to take things out of context and stuff like that, but it's like the amount of like mental gymnastics you really have to do to pretend that this synod is not being set up to be a revolution. It's like you have to ignore every single personnel change that's gone on when you're picking men who have vocally spoken out in favor of the rainbow movement and who are openly saying they want to overturn the wording in the catechism. Like, I'm sorry, that's not I'd have to actually deny reality to sit there and say that these things aren't going on. The only time I see communion get denied is when you kneel. 100% me. Several times.
What was that comment, Rob? It was some person was talking about it was something that Kennedy put out. Yeah, Tyler P. Right, with the DJ priest.
Oh yeah. Kennedy was proved 100% correct with that, by the way.
Yeah.
So okay, so they were. I'm sorry, Nick. I'm going to let you go in a sec. They were trying to tell us, hey, look, DJ priest is really a trag, because they showed him in a Beretta and like a traditional cassock. But go ahead, Nick. You could.
No. I was just going to say, if you guys had seen it, like, so Kennedy put out, I think this afternoon, a video on the subject of the DJ priest. But the DJ priest, I guess he's Portuguese. He went on a Portuguese radio station, right? And you can watch the video of this, and you can read the transcript in Portuguese and in English, whatever language you want. And he comes out and he says, he's basically
except Latin, that's verboten.
Yeah, no, that's haram. So he said, he was asked the question, so can sodomy be okay if there's not any, like, in their conscience, through their conscience have reasoned that, we're in a loving relationship and this isn't bad. He also applies this to the sin of self-abuse, right? Pollution. And the priest just comes out and basically says, like, if their conscience isn't bothering them and if they don't feel like they're wounding their human dignity, then, who am I to judge, essentially?
How is that different? How is that different from what LifeSite just put out about when Francis was directly asked by a Jesuit? He said, what do you say about this? The same question about, people living in these same-sex relationships. And Francis does. Okay. So what Francis does is he never comes right out and says, no, I'm condoning this. What he says is, we can't put too much of responsibility on people who aren't ready for it yet. And everyone is welcome. And it's like, okay, you could probably wiggle around that statement. You probably could wiggle around that statement. But
I just want Thomas to, like, sit down with him and say, please explain to me how, and I'm not saying this is what Pope Francis is, but I'm just applying it back to the DJ priest. Please explain to me how the conscience, the rightly formed conscience, which is the arbiter of truth, not the source of truth, but the arbiter of truth, and is going to have to be conformed to the natural law, is somehow supposed to wiggle out and say, well, if my conscience doesn't get to it. When leftists say conscience, what they mean is their feelings. What they mean is their passion. They're just like, well, how do you feel about this deep down? Well, deep down in my core, I just feel that, I do love this person and it is okay. That doesn't matter. That could just be your fallen passions. That could be the burrito you ate at lunch. You have to go back and say, what does divine revelation and the natural law say? This stuff is immoral and it doesn't make any sense.
What about all of the people who, like, I saw somebody said yesterday, like, all of the young Catholics I'm talking to are starting to question papal infallibility. They're all starting to look to the Orthodox. They're all starting to look in other places, because how many Protestant converts came into the church?
Wasn't that Kale?
No, Kale highlighted it. It was somebody else that said it. But like, dude, so much of my conversion had to do with seeing the Catholic Church stand their ground on birth control. Like, seeing that every other denomination caved, even the Orthodox, when it came to that, like, but not the Catholic Church. Like, seeing that was like, you saw God's hand preventing the church from going off on this teaching on faith and morals, and the consequences of artificial birth control have been catastrophic to society. So now when you have a hierarchy who's sitting there and downplaying these things, it's really earth-shattering for a lot of people. And I understand. I mean, to me, I empathize with people, the struggle that they're going through. And it's like, I try not to be too harsh in my criticism. I also try to be compassionate to people who are struggling with this, because I'm confused about it. I don't know what's going on, right? It's like all of us are like, what the heck, man? Like, we're all struggling with this.
I've gotten to a lot more peace about it, just because I realized, like, so on the one hand, Protestantism and Orthodoxy, every person I've ever talked to who's considered converting to Orthodoxy, it's always for the worst reasons. They're always basically, it goes back to just, they want some, like, essentially like ascetical discipline and like doctrinal soundness and liturgical beauty. But then it's like, okay, you look, amongst all of them who all disagree with each other, you're going to have groups that allow divorce and remarriage multiple times. You're going to have groups that allow contraception. You're going to even have it sometimes down to like, well, depends on your priest. If you have the priest here, he might be against it. A priest here might be against it. You're starting to see
the Orthodox Church in America started to bless gay relationships.
You see that. You see altar girls in the Greek Orthodox Church. You see all these types of things. So, like, pretty much any of the reasons that someone would want to leave the Catholic Church isn't a
You're
good
going to
one.
see it.
Yeah, and it's like Protestantism. Yeah, just read the Fathers, and they'll demolish it before it even exists. I came to a lot of peace, though, just recognizing that, and again, preface, I'm not a ascete when I say this, but that, like, there are effectively two churches going on right now, and the Pope is the head of both. The Pope is the head, whether he knows it or not, of what Archbishop Lefebvre just called the conciliar church, which you can just define, if you want a definition of what is the conciliar church, you can define the conciliar church as essentially a group of liberals who are influenced willingly or unwillingly by the Freemasonic mentalities and philosophies that are actively trying to change church teaching on faith, morals, liturgy, etc. And then he's also, of course, head of the Catholic Church, right? The mystical body of Christ that was established by Christ in 33 AD, which will continue, right, forever into heaven. But the problem is right now, because of how influenced these popes are by the spirit of the age and by the post-conciliar movement, that they're unfortunately effectively leading just one, even though
so what I don't like is when people try to make it like this is a liturgical thing. This is not a liturgical thing. Like, this is not like, so if you really, I loved, if you guys have never watched our interview with Joshua Charles, especially, we put a clip up of him describing the mystery of iniquity. And the mystery of iniquity really gets into this, where it's like, you will have people who want to continue having the name Catholic, remain in the body of the church, who are essentially apostates, who don't believe the Catholic faith. And you have that. I mean, you could just look at Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden doesn't actually believe the Catholic faith, but he goes to mass. Yeah, all of them.
Like, what's it called in your city? AOC. She's a quote Catholic. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah, they all go get their ashes on Ash Wednesday and stuff, right? So it's like, so you do have this thing going on where we're all in the same church. We're all in, but the mystical body of Christ is about faithful. This whole thing was never about liturgy. What happened was they tried to say that Taylor Marshall was using the traditional Latin Mass as a rallying point. And that's why Traditionis Custodes had to come out, because we were using the Latin Mass as a rallying point instead of having the Pope as the point of unity, right? We're trying to use the liturgy as a point of unity. But really, people weren't using it as a point of unity. People were looking for a lifeboat to hear orthodoxy. People just wanted to hear Orthodox teaching, and they knew if they went to a traditional Mass, you're going to get a priest who leans in a traditional manner. And I'll tell you, man, most of like the homilies you hear at a traditional Mass, they're not like they're just not crazy. Like,
they're just on the faith. Like this last Sunday, my homily's on the 3 theological virtues because it's in the traditional collect. But it's like, to your point, notice how every single Catholic of goodwill who's trying to practice all has insane horror stories, whether it goes back to homily, Mass, catechesis, discipline. The fact that everyone is having these horror stories, and it's not just like some random bumpkin who had a crazy story, but everyone's having these stories, should go to tell you that we're going through something insane. absolutely off the wall.
I just have to point something out. We're at 183 live viewers, which I think is a record, but I know 200 would be a record.
Yeah, I
Go invite your
think we
friends.
might have broke 200 once with Father Isaac, but I'm not
Father
sure.
Isaac. Okay, yeah. I wasn't paying
Go,
attention to that
go
episode.
open extra tabs on your phone and
Well, I think that we really should wrap this one up. And
Actually, Anthony, because I set it up as 2 separate local streams, they each get 2 hours.
oh, okay, good, perfect. Okay, so we don't have to rush off of here. So
No,
all
we
right.
don't have to rush.
Okay, so
Do you want to get to the other Lewis tweet?
Yeah, let's bring the Mike Lewis tweet up, and then I'll explain to everybody what we're doing after this. All right, so somebody posted that Scott Hahn wrote this about a month.
This just came on naturally when I brought up the Lewis tweet.
What is this? The Russian anthem?
The Soviet anthem.
All
Sorry,
right,
guys.
so Scott Hahn a month ago wrote, "I am grateful for the inspiring words of our beloved Pope Francis in his recent message." And it was Pope Francis makes urgent call to recover Eucharistic adoration in the church. Now, Scott Hahn describes Francis as our beloved Pope Francis. This is a month ago. So somehow within the last month, Scott Hahn has developed this schismatic attitude that Mike Lewis felt the urge to go and write this article. So he wrote, what is this supposed to demonstrate? Asking seriously that Scott Hahn isn't sedevacantists, that Pope Francis said something nearly a month ago that is up to his standards. It's been a decade. It's been a decade of Pope Francis, and a month ago, Scott Hahn said something very beautiful about him, calling him beloved Pope Francis. So unless you can demonstrate anything other than the Strickland statement in the last month, I would say the onus is on you to prove it. Now, go up a little because he continues on in that. It's a thread. So I love the Pope and I pray for him every day is the boilerplate comeback of 90% of critics who accuse the Pope of and dissent from Pope Francis's teachings. If you can't find something more recent and less generic, like about Pope Francis, that's telling. Okay, so he is kind of right? Like we all, like people that have a hard time, friends go, I pray for the Pope every day.
Well, notice what
Yeah,
he
but there's
said.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong. What he's doing is that's first off just like a very cheap street shot that's not very academically sound. But number two, notice the insinuation in the original statement where he says up to his standards. So he's almost implying that Scott Hahn has this personal set of standards that he's going to apply. And he's like, oh, it's not Pope Francis's standards, it's your standards. That problem is this constant narrative that we hear, which is that traditionalists are Protestant or have a Protestant mentality. Let me tell you this, that are sure, maybe that applies to random
Nick, did you know you're a Soviet honeypot?
You know, I did tell Anthony before on that I find Russian women the most attractive, so maybe that's where it comes from or something like that.
So we were having a debate in the green room. We were talking about marriage, and my advice to Nick was, Nick, marry a woman who doesn't speak English.
Well, actually, his first words to me wasn't, hello, Nick, how are you doing? Was, Nick,
You should be celibate.
be celibate. And I was thinking he was going to give me like a priesthood talk, a religious talk, but he's just like, no, marriage, these women.
Listen, all I'm going to say is women.
Whoa, hold on.
Think before you speak.
Okay, go.
Listen to me. They like to complain. It's something like they get like a feeling of euphoria as they complain about things. It's a strange thing. I don't know. Like I come home
100% Lou. 100%.
Don't take advice from me. Look, I would never not encourage marriage. I think marriage is a beautiful thing. I'm just talking about the fairer sex here. They have this thing where I think they get like a euphoric feeling when they complain about things, even when things are made. Like I like to come home and appreciate the great life the Lord has given me. And I come home and it's
I'm removing my face from this.
I don't want my face associated with this.
I just don't understand why you women like to complain no matter how good things are. It's just a strange thing to me.
I have 3 separate tickers for you giving women in marriage advice.
Sorry, Rose says, we don't like to complain. I'm only teasing you ladies. I'm just kidding. My wife was just in a mood today, and
If your wife doesn't crash the car, she might not be a she.
That's 100% right. My wife never watches anything we do, but I know she's gonna catch like this little segment.
Just tuning in
Enoch with his dad jokes.
What are you when you gotta go potty? You're a Russian. What are you when you gotta go potty? You're a fiend. What are you when you're done? You're a finish. All right, bravo, Enoch. He loves his dad joke.
Terrible.
Wait. Well, why do you trads like to complain? We have such a wonderful Pope.
Popey Pope. Hold on. The resident Protestant to Jewish convert needs us to go back.
You go back to
everything we just said. All right. So this whole stream is basically about how Scott Hahn drove a police car and crashed it into some environmentalists. And then Anthony said he's a good driver as opposed to women.
Yes. Basically the whole stream.
And then Russians.
So Aaron is a Protestant, and he still watches our show. I talked to him, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, and I told him one of the local shows one night when he's there, I'm bringing him on the stream. I want to talk to him. I want to get to the bottom of it, and hopefully we don't have to proselytize him. Hopefully we can evangelize them. But
because we're not allowed to proselytize.
I know we're not allowed to proselytize, but I am not against waterboarding Aaron to get him into the church, is all I'm saying. All right, guys, there's not going to be much of a great conclusion to this episode. We just wanted to come on and defend the wonderful Scott Hahn. Which we're
doing, by the way, because Anthony is trying to get him on. That's why.
Oh, yeah. Full disclosure, I had an email exchange with Dr. Scott Hahn recently, and he said he's a little busy because the semester just started, but I think we have a very good chance of getting him on. But so Rob and I were tossing around titles for this episode, and I'm like, all right, let's go Strickland, Ralph Martin, Scott Hahn, the triumvirate of Tradistan. Rob goes, if we could get a fourth in,
we can call it a Tetrarchy.
We can call it a Tetrarchy. I'm like, I throw Burke in. Let's go.
We're more nerdy than we put on.
Yeah, we are. All right, so listen, here's the deal. We're gonna go from here to our locals, where we are going to play Catholic trivia. We started this channel playing Catholic trivia. If it is going to be free for everyone, so if you're not,
you do have to go to locals, but it's free.
Yeah, you just have to click the link to go on our locals, come over. Now, you won't be able to play trivia if you're not a paid supporter. So what we do is we play trivia. The audience plays as well. So the audience, the first 3 people to get the answer right, they get a point. At the end of the show, we find out who had the most points, and the winner gets a prize. This week's prize is going to be, we're going to do 2 things. We have a book, we have a good book, and we have this DVD, Science Tests Faith.
The book is Slaying Dragons by Charles Frawny.
Charles Frawny, Slaying Dragons, and this Science Test Faith DVD is phenomenal. It's on Eucharistic miracles. It's out of this world. So if you guys have never checked out one of our trivia episodes, you have no idea how fun and interesting they are. We're also going to bring 3 of our local supporters on the stream with us to play with us. So guys, please, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, share this show with people. We are trying to grow this channel. Rob and I have a lot of things we would love to do, but we just need a little bit bigger reach. I'm trying to get Michael Knowles on here.
You know, this statement is the absolute truest thing about this trivia game.
Yeah, you can play, but it's not actually going to matter, guys.
It's kind of like
blow the punchline at the beginning of the show.
It's kind of like North Korean elections. It's just like
or American elections.
Yeah, or American.
I'm so grateful I'm Roman Catholic, and for 73 years I've tried to learn about my faith, and I keep learning. Stick around. We do teach a little bit about the faith, and especially in trivia. You will learn some things about your faith when we do trivia. Guys, so
it is going to take us 10 or 15 minutes to get everything set up and everyone connected, so it's not going to be right away, but head over and you can hang out.
It'll be like in like 3-4 minutes we'll get on there, and then we'll just shoot the breeze with everybody that actually makes it over there, and we'll hang with you guys, and we're going to pick a couple of contestants to come on the stream with us. I know Margot wants to come on with us. We're going to bring Margot and then 2 other people. But yeah, we're trying to get Michael Knowles. I want to get Jonathan Peugeot. I want to get. Who else did I say I really wanted to get, Rob?
Jonathan, what's his face? Scott Hahn.
Oh, I think
those are the
Michael
ones.
Knowles.
I've heard of him before.
Thursday night we have Jesse Romero.
Yes.
Thursday night, Jesse Romero is going to come on.
Here's the real question: when are you getting Bishop Fillet on? Let's get some real guests on here.
We've talked about Williamson.
Williamson.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. He probably would do one, but he'd be so spicy that you guys knew the end.
We'd have to do
Locals
it
only.
locals only. And a lot of people want me to get E. Michael Jones on.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
So
Can we get them both on at once?
they've been on together before. It's like they butt heads about everything but one topic they're totally in agreement with. They certainly have one thing in common, those guys.
Ripperger will happen one day. We have no idea.
So
Yeah,
here's the plan. Here's the plan. Also, we have Bishop Schneider coming on, and after the Schneider interview, I'm going to send that to Strickland and try and get Strickland on.
Yep.
And then after that, send them both to Williamson and see if Williamson will get on. Actually, send it to all four and see if all four will get on, but just don't tell the others and see if it'd be one big reunion.
Father Paul Robinson would be cool. He's the one that wrote. He's SSBX. He wrote a book on science, on realism.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really good.
And we're gonna get okay. So we have Father. Who do we have? Maudsley. Father Maudsley booked. We're also going to get Father Charles Murr after I finish reading the book.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through it.
You're halfway through it already?
Halfway through. Also, guys,
Listening.
I never knew this. I have always wanted there to be an audiobook of Michael D. O'Brien's Father Elijah, and you can't buy it. But if you go on the Formed app in audiobooks, they have an audiobook version of Father Elijah.
Really?
And that's an amazing book. So if you guys ever read that book and you don't like to read and you like to listen to audiobooks, check that out.
We do need to get Kwasniewski on.
I was just going to actually ask you about that because I have to. I got to finish the Father Murr book, and then I'm going to read the Roman Rite book, and then we'll book Kwasniewski too.
Okay.
All right, guys, join us over on Locals. We're going to play the most fun Catholic trivia game you've ever played. We would basically make fun of each other for an hour. And
I'm surprised we did not get into a rant about confession lines.
I'm going to do a solo rant on that. Well, not a solo, but me and you will just come on, and I'll lay a few haymakers at all you people who like to spend 20 minutes in confession when there's only 45 minutes on a Saturday.
One could argue that is a venial sin.
I would argue it might be mortal.
I'd like to see that argument, actually.
Depriving every other soul in line of getting absolution is pretty serious. I don't know. And I guess maybe they don't have full consent. But,
it'd be you could argue it would be a fairly potential.
Trust me, if they're spending 45 minutes in confession, they don't have the full knowledge necessary to know what mortal sin is.
So, Luis,
they have the full knowledge of where they are at currently.
Yeah.
Luis, the app is Formed, Formed, and you usually can get a free. So, like Formed, you have to. I think they charge you for it, but I think if you go to your parish, they'll give you a free code. Like I don't pay for it. I got a free login from my parish, so I don't have to pay for Formed.
I think this weekend I'm going to spend a day photoshopping Alex Crow's hair on Father Ripperger.
Now that is immortal.
All right, guys, we're gonna head over to the other platform. I hope you guys all come. It's free, so check it out. If you like it enough, maybe you'll want to play with us. It's $5. You come play with us. So, all right, take us out, Rob.
I don't know why. Can't get enough your love, babe.